Um, this is going to be quite an interesting workshop, and I think potentially very high impact. Anybody who has been around for more than like 2 weeks knows that Brian can't stick to a plan for the life of him. See, Brian has a broad goal, broad vision, but the moment Brian makes a plan, halfway through he'll have a better idea and need to pivot. That's kind of what's happening today. We are still very much aligned with the vision of, just continuing with the Limit series. But yeah, we're going to be doing something just a little bit different than the original plan today. We are going to cover quite a lot, probably more than you'll reasonably fully internalize in one session. That's okay. The recording will be around. I want to expose you guys to how all this is working together so we can work on it piece by piece. The first thing we're going to talk about, and that is the goal for today. The goal for today is to really have a clear picture of what the puzzle pieces are, what we're trying to fit together regarding the limit on any given track. Any given corner, really. So let me go ahead and start the screen share here. And let's make the background black. Let's go dark mode. There we go. So, something I've noticed, and this isn't everybody, but this is a lot of people. Something I've noticed is that, we're talking about all these pieces in the workshop. And we're starting to talk more about fitting them together as well. But it's really easy, even as we progress into the array top split, all that, it's really easy to default to old habits. And not even old habits. It's like, here's Brian saying that here are all the pieces, right? Brian says that Brian knows the pieces and he's sharing them with you. We have a dynamic where Brian hasn't really led you in a wrong direction, but there's still kind of a leap of faith to say, okay, I'm going to follow this. Right? To say that this is really what's happening in racing. These are the pieces. So what I wanted to do today is really outline those pieces for you and call it for what it is. If you want to take that leap of faith, here it is. And if you don't, that's perfectly okay. But what we've seen so far is, well, this is how everything we've been working on fits together. We have talked about the limit being everything, right? 90% of going fast. Actually, you know what? I don't even think it's 90%. Let's say 80% equals limit, maintaining limit, the remaining 20% is fitting limit to track. But that's not the whole picture, right? I mean, very broadly, that is the whole picture, but that's not really describing the pieces that go into it. So let's talk about that a little bit. We have a corner. Let's just make a corner here. That's a poorly shaped corner. They're usually relatively symmetrical. That's still okay, whatever. You know, there's the stuff that we all know. We want to use all the track. We want to start on the outside. Apex somewhere in here. And exit on the outside. Here's where the bit of the leap of faith comes in, though. It is really, really easy to try and go fast, right? To try and get on throttle earlier or to brake later. And often how that expresses itself is, you know, we might get on throttle over here and not be able to fully commit to throttle, right? Not be able to fully commit to moving away from fully lateral limit and getting to the longitudinal limit, you know, accelerating as much as we can. We may brake a little bit too late. And what happens when we brake too late? It's still possible to make the apex, but it sacrifices a lot on exit. Because what happens if we brake, you know, say right here is the optimal braking point. We brake up here. Well, we can often just blend braking and turning as we go into the corner. And yeah, that'll cause us to have to get on throttle later. We won't rotate as much. But I mean, that tends to feel pretty good. Right? Feels like we're going faster. So, this is the leap of faith that I'm talking about. The leap of faith is that, you know, we've got our limit graph, right? With the different markers. We've got straight, line braking, transition, releasing the brake, into fully turning. We don't care about slowing. If we slow, great, but the goal here is fully turning. And what I've observed is that outcomes are really, really, really strong if we're focusing on the limit in a straight line, right? So, oh, crap, I gotta erase this. Hold on. No. Okay, fine, whatever. outcomes are really, really strong. In every case, strongest when we are completely isolating this straight line piece and this turning piece. And that's what I want to work on today. I want to start there, and then we're going to talk about some balance stuff, some using all 4 tires, using fronts and the rears. So when I say leap of faith, the leap of faith is really just experimenting around, okay, when we're slowing down, we want that to be in a straight line as much as possible. And the moment that we are no longer slowing down, we are going straight to fully turning and just letting the chips fall. So we're slowing in a straight line. Transitioning into fully turning. Then fully turning down to the apex. And then immediately transitioning into optimizing acceleration. Getting on throttle as much as we can. If it's a very long corner, we can't go straight to throttle in some cases. That's where the turning throttle comes in. But, in an average simple corner, this is the structure. These are the pieces. And what I want to do today is start to play around with that. Because if we're trying to build out the corner from pieces that are less than optimized, that's just a hard cap on our pace. Right? If the pieces we're building the puzzle from just, aren't precise, aren't manufactured well, we're going to be smushing pieces together and it's just not going to be a clean fit. When I'm figuring out a track, I'm figuring out how do I make these pieces fit the track. I'm not doing something different. Right? This is our foundation. And the key piece here is completely separating the straight line, the slowing. We're slowing as much as we can. And sometimes that's not in a straight line. For example, VIR at the end of the back straight, we go up the hill, make a bit of a left into the long right-hander. So that would be a perfect example of we're slowing as much as we can. We have to sacrifice some slowing to go through that left-hander, make sure we are where we want to be on track. But the primary goal is just slowing as effectively as we can. And then the moment we're done with that, we are just turning as effectively as we can. So I will go ahead and show you guys a demonstration of what that looks like. Can somebody pick me a car and track? Lotus 49. Oh no. Peak Up Road America. That's a good one. Okay, we're getting a lot of Peak Up. All right, let's do Peak Up Road America. Lotus 49, okay, works, but is a lot of car and provides some confusion. Oh, free content. That's a good point. Okay. Let's do M2 at Okayama. I like M2 at Okayama. VIR is a great track, but it's tough for demonstration purposes because there are some additional complexities. what I want to do is set that really solid baseline, and then, later on we'll figure out what we need to tweak when it's more complex. Yeah, we'll do Okayama full. And we'll just quickly get into a scenario where we're active resetting turn 1. Turn 1 will be a nice clear place to start here. Not yet. There will be time for you guys to do this. Right now, it's just a demo. I want to show you guys what it looks like when we're doing what I'm describing of blending, and what it looks like when we have a really clear separation of that, slowing down focus and the turning focus. So, looks like this is going to be super laggy. Wonderful. I'm so excited. Hold on. Maybe I reduce quality here. What is going on with my PC? Okay, this is probably workable. I will swap my audio inputs. And let's hop in. Yeah, it's a little laggy, but this will do. And if the stream sound levels aren't in the right place for you, you can right-click on the stream itself and raise or lower the volume there. As we're going along here on the warm-up lap, just note my braking inputs. Okay, that's way too hard of a brake. I was driving the GR86 before this. But just note how I quickly go from like a steady straight line pressure to a turning pressure. Because I have a lot of confidence. Again, leap of faith, right? With all of my experience, I learn these things bit by bit, little by little, and put them together later. It's much more difficult to just hear it all put together and fully trust it, right? But all of my experience shows that that will lead to the best outcomes. So I have to figure out how to make that work for any particular corner. And trying to do something else will just lead me in a wrong direction. My active reset button isn't set up. Apologies. Well, on this outlap, I'll show you some examples of blending that I see all the time. So one example would be just continuously releasing pressure throughout the corner. So I'll do it here. Now, what'll happen in this car is if you're carrying a little too much trail brake as you're turning, you'll slide, but if you're carrying a lot too much as you're turning, you'll just understeer. So, in these cases, I'm not isolating turning. And I'm not doing it in a particularly realistic way, actually, because I don't know how to do it in this car. There we go. That just leads to a bit of a lack of control, and even when we are controlling it, that's naturally leading to some spots that are over and under the limit. I'll have some more clear examples here through turn 1. So this might just look like a normal corner at first, right? I'm not doing anything egregiously wrong. But what I'm doing is I'm not cleanly separating that straight line and that turning. I'll do it one more time. So you see pretty early, I'm still slowing, but I'm starting to turn toward the corner. Now, let's play around with cleanly isolating them. Well, that's a bad example. Braked a little too late. It's an M2, Brian. You see, that wasn't even a good corner, and yet the time just falls away. Even though it felt slower, I'm just getting such a cleaner angle through the corner because I'm immediately just, I'm slowing while I gotta stop doing that. I'm slowing while I'm slowing. And then as soon as I'm turning, I'm just turning. And yes, this is harder to get to the right place on track. Absolutely. You can see it, like, I could easily just point toward the corner. I could easily point toward the corner, get to the apex, run a decent looking corner, decent feeling corner. And once I started separating the slowing and the turning, I had to be I had to be better. I had to be more precise with my turn-in. I had to be more precise with my braking point. I had to figure out how to make that work. And it took me a few tries. But once I did, you could clearly see, I mean, I gained a 10th already. And there's another 10th in it when I keep dialing that in. So that's what I mean when we're cleanly and clearly separating the slowing and the turning, right? We're just using the trail brake. We're not overdoing any trail brake, right? The trail brake is only existing to get us from that slowing down state to the turning state as quickly as the car can handle. But there's that super, super clear separation of them. Does this make sense so far, everybody? I want to check in with you guys. And I will hop back on PC. One more time? Okay, I can do it one more time. Or better yet, I can look through the replay. Well, no, I'll just do it. So here's an example of pointing toward the corner. It's not the best example. I want to make it look good. And you can see, I can't get on throttle. Like, I gain on entry. But I spend a lot more time in the corner. Now, here's separating them. And just note how close I am to the outside edge before I turn. One more time. Like, I'm just staying aligned to that outside edge. And that wasn't perfect, but it was much closer. And that's going to be the easiest way to mentally check this for ourselves. Just making sure we're parallel to that white line on the outside until we commit to turning. Is there a thing that can indicate when you slowed enough to transition? It's going to have to be a bit of trial and error, Edvardus, but you're exactly right. 100% slow, 100% turn, 100% accelerate out of it. That's exactly right. It's very high commitment to each piece. P1 mantra, technical cue, you threshold brake and then trail for turning. But for P-cup, do you trail ever so slightly at the top of the braking pressure? Right. Okay, let me answer Mantra's question, then I'll get to you, Cairo. You're absolutely right, but I would not call the straight line bleeding off of the brake trail braking. Trail braking is just such a confused term. The P-cup is very aero dependent. So as we lose aero, as we slow down, yes, we have to reduce brake pressure to maintain limit because the limit is getting lower. And also, yes, the pickup is accepting of and wants a much higher sustained brake pressure than really most other cars in order to help it turn. And that leads me to Kairo's question. Yes, I was holding brake a steady 5% while turning. I've found that leads to that balances out the car so that both the fronts and the rears are at their limit. Whereas if I just transition to coasting, only the fronts would be at the limit. We'll talk more about that after this exercise, because that is the whole front versus rear thing that I want to get to. For now, though, let's hop on track and let's just take a few minutes doing exactly this. Really, really dialing in this. We are braking in a straight line. We are slowing 100%. And when we're done slowing 100%, we're turning 100%. Whatever that means to you, we'll dial in the turning 100% after this. So the 100% turning was like when I was doing it properly, I was transitioning for maybe half a second. And then I was 100% turning. Not exactly, Cairo, because what I'm doing is optimizing the turning. And look, I'll explain how that works. Let us get to that, okay? Because that's actually a not small conversation. I'll pull up the graphs. I'll show you how things are working. And I'll show you what I mean by optimizing the turning. Just for now, do your thing. Whatever optimizing turning means to you, do that. Let's just work on cleanly separating the slowing and the turning for the next 10 or so minutes. Absolutely, Edvardus. Absolutely, Formula Ford will work. Any car will work on this. Obviously, different car, limit will look, feel, sound different, but the principles remain exactly the same. Yep, apologies, just taking care of some stuff behind the scenes. I'm here. Um right. Trail breaking is not well defined, and we are going to define it after this exercise. Um there's just too much at once. I wanted to separate it out. And trail breaking in general, even done optimally, is significantly less effective when these things are not separated out. And it's also harder to understand when they're not separated out. So that's why we're starting here. All right, go ahead and we'll do this a 1 minute 1 minute warning. Is 100% turning a physical commitment to turning the wheel, or can it be used interchangeably with 100% lateral? Ha 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 ha. That's a very good question. Let me think about how to answer that. Because one wrong word throws off the answer here. What I mean by 100% turning is 100% lateral. We're optimizing lateral. When we're doing that close to optimally, that coincides with a commitment to turning the wheel. However, I would say that our mental priority is 100% lateral, even if imperfect, even if that means, something weird going on with the wheel. But as that settles into closer and closer to optimal, that coincides with a commitment to turning the wheel. Yeah, there you go. Yes, 100% slowing down to 100% rotation. That's accurate. 100% lateral also doesn't mean 0% brake. That's correct. I'll explain what that means nowish. So this is going to be a bit of a long explanation because we have to understand the dynamics of the limit to be able to understand the whole, wait, 100% lateral is not, 0% break. So let's go back to our favorite app, Microsoft Paint. All right. I think let's move this stuff over here so I have more space here. Anytime we're doing stuff in a car, we've talked about the limit as one thing before. What's really happening is the limit is 4 things, 4 tires, right? We can get very, very, very far with just thinking of the limit as fronts and rears. Like very far. That's all we really functionally need. Until we're starting to get into like deep setup work, deep understanding. So we'll just work with fronts and rears. But what I'm introducing here is instead of thinking of the limit as just the limit of the tires, it's the limit of the fronts versus the limit of the rears. Now, let's think of straight line first. So when we're optimizing for slowing down, what happens? We have 2 limit graphs, right? We have the front and we have the rear happening at the same time. There's the limit. There's the limit. I'm going to use a purple line for our input, for a request versus the limit. Because why not? Purple's a nice color, royalty. See, all of our inputs affect all 4 tires, right? There are only a couple things we can do to isolate. And we'll talk about that in a second. That's why we're starting with straight line. But let's say the car's really unbalanced, right? Say we're in an MX-5, actually. MX-5 is a perfect example. What'll happen is as we apply brake, we will reach the limit of the rears and still be well under the limit of the fronts. So this is what not using ABS at all in the MX-5 tends to feel like. It tends to be like, because the MX-5 is really weird. The brake bias is really far rearward. In iRacing, it's a little less severe than it is in real life, but this is the dynamic that happens. So now let's imagine we could change some things. In a straight line, our inputs, we can't change how much our inputs affect the two tires or the two axles. There are a couple things we can do to isolate one axle or another. Specifically, engine braking is the biggest one. So if we use a lot of engine braking, instead of that, say we spike engine braking, we shift really early, the rears will spike over and then drift under the limit while the fronts just stay steady. Another thing we can do is change brake bias. So brake bias is the only thing we can really do to change the balance of our inputs. Say we push the brake bias forward a bunch. Well, now instead of capping out right around here, we are like, let's just say we magically change the brake bias in the middle of the braking zone. Well, with the same input, now we are, more evenly spaced compared to the limit, but with the same input, now we just reduced the request on the rear and added request on the fronts. So with the same input, we're just under the limit of both. That gives us a little more room to press the brake harder and be more efficient, closer to the limit overall. Right? This is a big one, guys. I understand this is probably not clicking as easily as a lot of the other stuff we've talked about. How are we doing? Can I get like a red, yellow, green on what I'm discussing so far? Green being, yeah, totally get it. Keep going. Yellow being, well, we're pushing it. And red being, I'm lost. Nice. All right, lots of greens. That's encouraging. So, moving on. What happens when we shift weight? So I'm going to extend the graph here. Let's say that was our straight line braking. Beyond that is turning. Well, let's say our inputs were keeping us at the limit of the fronts and the rears, right? So we were right around here, right around here. Well, we shift over, let's ignore transition for now. Let's just go straight to fully lateral. Let's just say we coast, right? We just coast and we turn fully lateral. Well, if the balance is imperfect, because remember, we can't change the balance of our inputs. So what we're actually doing with the weight shift stuff is changing the balance of the limit itself. What happens when we're in an understeer state is that the limit of the fronts decreases while the limits of the rear increases. So this is what we're looking at when, in most cars when we're coasting through a turn. We're like 100% turning, but we're coasting. We're not adding any trail brake. So what happens is, yes, we are using all of the tire's grip to turn, but we're limited as far as our input goes by the front limit. You see, because our input request is going to be the same. We can't change that balance. So there's all of this wasted energy of the rears right now that isn't being used for turning, right? We're at the limit of the fronts, but the limit of the fronts is lower than it could be, and we're just way under the limit of the rears. That's where the trail brake comes in. Because yes, you're absolutely right. Trail brake does add a longitudinal force. So it's not a pure like we're only turning. There's that little bit of slowing involved. But we will still turn more with a trail brake, because what happens is with that little bit of trail brake, we will balance out, we'll rebalance the limit. And now, as we add that trail brake, that is more total input, right? More total input, but the front limit is just growing. So the more total input isn't overloading the fronts. Everybody's happy. Actually, I'll add a red here to signify the trail brake. And now we're utilizing more of the rears. The rear limit came down, but we weren't using it anyway, so we don't care. So we're just getting more total grip from the car. We're utilizing the rears more through the turn. And we're getting a happy side effect of slowing down. That's why holding that steady trail brake is just optimizing turning. We're getting more total force from the tires. And, maybe I haven't spoken about that clearly enough until this point. But I hope this clarifies things for everybody. How are we doing on this? Does this make sense? Green, nice. Green Elmo, love it. Now, what happens when we add too much trail brake? Well, one of two things can happen. Maybe as we're adding trail brake, this input on the fronts is growing more quickly than the limit of the fronts. What would happen then as we add more trail brake? Whoops, I don't want to do that. As we add more trail brake, the request on the front goes up, but the limit of the front doesn't go up enough. So now we're over the limit of the fronts. Now we're starting an understeer. That's when we get understeer. When the input, what we're requesting of the tires, just exceeds the additional grip that we're giving the fronts. That will be more likely in some cars. In other cars, what'll be more likely, and some setups even, in other cars, other setups, what'll be more likely is as we add too much trail brake, we don't really exceed the limit of the fronts, but now we're reducing the limit of the rear and adding input to the rear, because whenever we're adding input to both sets, both axles. This is when we get oversteer. What we're looking for with that trail brake is to balance out that green line, balance it out so that we can just extract the most from both the fronts and the rears. And again, going too far can lead to both over and understeer. It's situational. When do we get four-wheel slide? Good question. Four-wheel slide typically happens when that happens. So, no, for oversteer and then catching it wouldn't really be a four-wheel slide because the front's never lost grip. The front's never really went over the limit. Four-wheel slide happens in a really specific situation where you see here, we exceeded the limit of the rears first. Right? We exceeded the limit of the rears first, but then immediately after exceeded the limits of the fronts. So as we exceed the limit of the fronts, we're actually getting less grip from the front, right? So it's almost saving the car. If we stayed at the limit of the fronts and we slid the rears, we just keep sliding. But if we exceed the limit of the fronts, get less grip, well, less force from the fronts helps catch the rear all on its own. But now we're getting that weird four-wheel slide. There's another type of four-wheel slide where the weight's too far back, but we shift the weight really quickly, so the car catches itself. Yeah, absolutely. So the optimal, like true optimal way to drive any given car is going to be dependent on the car itself. It's going to be dependent on setup. There's a lot of little nuances based on what the car's natural behavior is like. But this is the baseline for understanding what's actually happening, like what we're actually trying to optimize here. You're only catching because you have less grip. Right. And like I said, there are a couple different types of four-wheel slide. One of them happens, well, they typically start in transition, which we're not really going deep into today. Yes, Nemina, yes. That's absolutely right. Like that, in all cases, that is what's happening. It's just the cause can be a bit different. How are you liking this workshop, everybody? Are you enjoying this type of workshop, this type of content? Is this helping you guys? Gold. Okay. All right. Awesome. Oh no, Sammy's blaming the car. Oh no, somebody stop him. Okay. Awesome. Glad to hear, Gunther. Brilliant. More where this came from. So, I would love to do another demo, but unfortunately, the choppiness of the VR was getting to me. I was getting really nauseous at the end of the last one. However, I think we can get away without a demonstration this time because if we understand the theory of why trail brake, well, you guys can play with that dial. You can play with that lever on your own, right? Understanding that we're looking to balance out those green lines and get the most out of them. Weight moves forward, Front green line goes up, rear green line goes down. Weight moves backward, rear green line goes up, front green line goes down. Go ahead and try this out, guys, using this separation, because this will be much more clear. I agree, Daniel. I agree. I haven't really felt like going against the entire racing industry with new naming conventions yet, but I do think it needs to happen at some point. Orange, yeah, true. There are 3 separate things happening with the brake. There's bleeding off in a straight line. There's the trail brake, which is purely just maintaining the green balance through the transition. And there's the steady hold of the brake, the steady brake drag to maintain the balance through full lateral. So, go ahead and try this out, everybody. But make sure that you are still cleanly separating the slowing and the turning, right? 100% slowing to 100% rotation. The effects of the balancing of the green line will be so much more murky if there's not a clear separation here. And it'll be vice versa, much more clear if there is that clear separation. Edvardus, yes. So you can feel that in cars with a lot of weight transfer. For example, like the Pro Truck, like the Pro 2, we tend to feel that things happen slower. I don't know if delay is the right word, but it takes more time for the car to respond to anything, which means our inputs should be a little slower. They'll need to be. Well, actually, no, I take that back. That was incorrect, what I just said. Our inputs typically don't need to be slower at a baseline, but we need to be responsive to the weight transfer. We need to understand that, yeah, whatever we do is going to take that split second to apply. The suspension is back to the plates. Exactly. Dinner plate theory. Exactly. Yes, Nemina, yes. Exactly. Maintaining pressure is the meat of the cake. I completely agree with that. Where do you go for dinner plate theory? Oh, I don't think that one's posted. Let's follow up on that one, Kevin. Just shoot me a message. I'll run you through it quickly. All right, guys. So I'm budgeting 7 minutes from now, so 40 past the hour, to play with this, to try this out. And then we'll recap, see how it goes. Edvardus, I am doing absolutely everything I can to not make content. I know I'm going to have to eventually, but I don't want to become a content creator. Do it. All right. Take care, Greg. Really struggling with 100% acceleration due to off camber on exit. So, Matthew, that may be due to simply turning in too early and taking an apex that's too early to be able to comfortably get on throttle. It's going to feel weird, but it's easier to do when we're maintaining the separation. What you can try is just straight line braking for a little bit longer. Straight line braking for a little bit longer, same braking point, turn in a little bit later. That way, the car will be more pointed toward the inside when you get to the apex, right? So same principles, even though you won't see the apex the same way. Like you'll be pointed further away from the apex when you start turning. It's going to feel super weird. But if you just delay that turn in by a little bit, slow down that tiny bit more, and then same as always, go straight to 100% rotation, that should line up the corner better for you. All right, 1 minute warning. Alrighty, how was that last run? Were you guys able to play with the theory side practically? Aha, good stuff, Cairo. Very good stuff. Nice. You understand how it works, you're able to do it. That's great. Gain hundreds every time you press the reset button. Nice, nice. Floating on the M2 through the brakes, on the brakes through the corner. Oh, that's a good feeling. Well, faster steering does not increase the limit of the fronts. The only thing that's changing the limit of the fronts and the rears is the brake, is the weight transfer. There is lateral weight transfer, but we don't really have to conceptualize that. I think that's just wasted energy. Faster steering, if you just steer faster than the weight is overall transferring, you are just exceeding, you're adding more input than the car can handle at that moment. Yeah, sure thing, Matthew. Sure thing. There's also free mental load to think about turning if brake pressure is constant. Yes. Yes. And we love free mental space here. It's so important. Nice. Nice. Great stuff, everybody. This is awesome. This is really cool. I wasn't sure about doing all this at once, but yeah, you guys have soaked it all up. This is brilliant. Nice job. You're making me want cake. Cake and a mimosa. No, you're exactly right, Cairo, which is why I did it. I was just like, oh, wait. Okay, we might have to revisit this stuff. Like, I wasn't sure it would all sink in. But I wanted to get the overview done so that, we're setting the framing to have it sync later. Orange cake. Oh, man. It doesn't matter. It's for the meme, Mahid. Next thing you know, we're starting a bakery. Yes, yes. Starting to relate it to your rental carts. Good. Karting does have a little bit of a different, the principles of tires are all the same, but weight transfer happens very, very differently. So just be aware that this might not apply one to one. But if you understand these concepts, you can start to think through how karting might be different. And that's a completely different conversation. Um, Karting content happening soon, TM, but that's, there's some other priorities before we can do that. Really, like dialing this in is critical to do karting content, because to understand karting, you have to understand this stuff. This stuff is so much easier to understand, and then you layer in some karting. Actually, Kevin, yes, it is faster. It requires precision on timing, but I would actually say it's easier if you understand it. Julian has been experiencing that very clearly. Um I'll tell you guys what. So I coached Julian in real life. If you don't know the story, I coached him in real life for the Canadian finals, um, Canadian Rotex finals. Like, wow, it was like 2 weeks ago or something. Um, it feels like it's been 3 months. How's it only been 2 weeks? Anyway, we made a lot of progress, like an insane amount of progress. 4 years worth of progress in 4 days of understanding the dynamics of karting. But that's definitely stuff that we still need to distill down to be able to, well, there's groundwork to do before we can make a really, really powerful approach to karting. Rotax, yes, Rotax carts are very, very fun to drive. Can confirm. I mean, unironically, you can only learn so much from Reynolds, but yeah, 2 rib protectors for sure. That being said, I don't know about going to DD2 on day one. That's pushing it. Oh, but you had fun. I know you had fun. I've never been able to drive a DD2. That sounds awesome. And cracked ribs. Oh no. DD2 would feel like a rocket, honestly. All right, guys. Well, that is all I have planned for today. And honestly, this I wouldn't want to do any more as far as learning work. Um, I think there's a lot of experimentation you guys have to do. You guys have available to you with what we've worked on today. Literally just got here. Okay, Josh, let me know if you want me to send you a recording or yeah, just join the next one. Best of luck, everybody. Feel free to follow up with any questions. Glad to hear. Hey, if you're saying it every time, I mean, look, that's what we're going for. We want it to be great every time. And thank you guys. Truly. Um, you guys are the reason I'm able to do all this. I'm able to share all this and get better at sharing it and put it together in different ways. This is honestly, I can't imagine doing anything different. And that's only possible thanks to you guys. So thank you. Any word on weekend race? I know there have been some delays on that. Like I mentioned in chat, I mentioned in chat, I have SRF at Olton Park without the first chicane penciled in, but there is absolutely nothing officially decided. So be aware, like that's that's what I'm going for, but um subject to change. Mahid, don't you dare start that again. Oh no. Um Nemina, I wouldn't bank on it. All right, guys. Have a great night, great day. Enjoy your practice. Have fun playing with these dials with the limit balancing act. Um yeah, thanks again. Have a great time, have a great week, and I will catch you next time.